The cold wind of early winter swept through the quiet streets of the small western town of Willow Creek. Dust rolled along the wooden sidewalks as the townspeople hurried about their day. Horses trotted past wagons, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery. But near the old red-brick schoolhouse at the edge of town, a young woman sat alone on the steps, clutching a worn leather bag and staring at the empty road ahead of her. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and in just a few hours she had lost almost everything. Clara had come to Willow Creek 2 years ago as the town's schoolteacher. She was kind, patient, and determined to give the town's children the education they deserved. The children loved her. Even the most stubborn boys who preferred horses to books eventually warmed up to her gentle but firm guidance. But kindness didn't always protect someone from hardship. The school board had called her in that morning. Their faces were stiff, their voices uneasy. "Miss Whitmore," the chairman said, clearing his throat, "the town's funds are limited. We regret to inform you that we can no longer afford your position." Clara's heart had dropped. She tried to argue, reminding them how the children needed schooling, but decisions made by desperate men were rarely changed. By noon, she was no longer Willow Creek's teacher. Now she sat outside the empty schoolhouse, unsure where she would go next. Her landlord had already warned her that rent was due in 3 days. Without work, she had no way to pay. Clara looked down at her hands. "They're right," she whispered quietly to herself. "A poor teacher with no family. What good am I here now?" A distant sound broke her thoughts. Hoofbeats. Slow. Powerful. Confident. She looked up. A tall black horse approached along the dusty road, its rider sitting straight in the saddle like a man who had spent his entire life riding the plains. The animal moved with calm authority, and the townspeople nearby stepped aside instinctively. Everyone in Willow Creek knew that horse, and everyone knew the man riding it. Ethan Callahan, the richest rancher in the county, owner of the enormous Silver Creek Ranch, a spread so vast that some said you could ride all day and still not reach the end of his land. But Ethan Callahan was not known only for his wealth. He was known for something else. Silence. Since his wife had died 3 years earlier, Ethan had become a man of few words. He rarely visited town except for supplies. Rumors about him spread constantly. Some said he had become cold. Others said grief had hollowed him out. But one thing everyone agreed on: he loved his 2 sons more than anything in the world. As Ethan rode past the schoolhouse, his sharp eyes noticed Clara sitting alone. He slowed his horse. For a moment he simply studied her. Her coat was thin for winter. Her bag looked nearly empty, and despite her attempt to sit straight, he could see the exhaustion in her shoulders. Ethan pulled the reins and stopped the horse. Clara looked up nervously. "Good afternoon, Mr. Callahan." His deep voice answered calmly. "You're not teaching today." Clara hesitated. "I no longer work here." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "The town can't afford a teacher anymore." For a moment there was silence, except for the wind. Ethan looked toward the empty schoolhouse, then back at her. "You're the one who taught my boys to read." Clara blinked in surprise. I didn't realize they were yours." "Daniel and Samuel." Her face softened instantly. "Your sons are wonderful boys. Daniel reads better than most children his age, and Samuel, he refuses to sit still," Ethan finished. Clara laughed quietly. "Yes." Ethan watched her carefully. Most people in town were nervous around him. They tried to impress him or flatter him. Clara did neither. She simply spoke honestly. After a long pause, Ethan asked one more question. "Where will you go?" Clara hesitated. "I'm still figuring that out." That answer told Ethan everything he needed to know. He studied her for another moment before speaking again. "What do you earn as a teacher?" Clara looked confused by the sudden question. "Very little." "How much?" $8 a week." Ethan nodded slowly. Then he said something that would change both their lives forever. "I need a mother for my sons." Clara blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Ethan continued calmly, as if discussing ranch business. "My boys need someone who can guide them. Someone patient. Someone who cares about their future. Clara's confusion grew. I agree, but... And you, Ethan said, looking directly at her, need a place to live. The wind seemed to pause around them. Clara stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. Then he said it. You marry me. You live at my ranch. My sons get the mother they need, and you get shelter. Her breath caught in her throat. Mr. Callahan, you can't be serious. I am. Clara stood up slowly. That's not how marriage works. Sometimes it is. His voice remained steady. I'm not asking for love. He paused. I'm asking for kindness. Clara searched his face. She expected arrogance. Instead, she saw something unexpected. Loneliness. I don't even know you, she said softly. You know my sons. And that's enough for you to marry a stranger? For them, yes. Clara felt her heart twist. She had seen those boys. The quiet sadness in Daniel's eyes when other children talked about their mothers. The way little Samuel clung to stories about families. Still, this is too sudden. Ethan nodded. Think about it. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded paper. My ranch address. He handed it to her. If you decide you want the job, come tomorrow morning. Clara stared at the paper in her hand. And if I don't? Ethan gently turned his horse. Then I wish you luck, Miss Whitmore. The horse stepped forward, but after a few steps, Ethan stopped again. Without turning around, he added one final sentence. My sons deserve someone kind. Then he rode away. Clara stood frozen on the schoolhouse steps, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. A marriage proposal from the richest man in the county. Not for love, but for shelter and two lonely boys. As the sun slowly dipped behind the mountains, Clara realized something frightening. She had nowhere else to go. And tomorrow morning, she might ride to Silver Creek Ranch and become the wife of a man she barely knew. The sun had barely begun to rise when Clara Whitmore stood outside the small stable at the edge of Willow Creek. The air was cold, and a thin mist floated across the open land. She clutched the folded paper Ethan Callahan had given her the day before. She had read the address so many times that she could recite it from memory, Silver Creek Ranch. All night Clara had turned the proposal over in her mind. Was it foolish? Perhaps. Unusual. Certainly. But the truth was simple and impossible to ignore. She had nowhere else to go. The small savings she had were barely enough to last a week. The nearby towns already had teachers. Winter was coming, and the thought of being alone without work frightened her more than she wanted to admit. But what truly stayed in her mind were two boys, Daniel and Samuel. She remembered how Samuel had proudly shown her a drawing of a horse he had made in class. She remembered Daniel staying late after school just to read another page of his book. Those boys needed someone, and maybe she did too. Clara took a slow breath and climbed into the small wagon that the baker had kindly offered to lend her for the trip. By mid-morning, she reached the gates of Silver Creek Ranch. The ranch was even larger than she imagined. Wide pastures stretched to the horizon, dotted with grazing cattle. Tall wooden fences lined the roads, and several barns stood proudly in the distance. Cowboys worked across the land, guiding horses and repairing fences. The ranch felt alive with movement and purpose. Clara suddenly felt very small. Before she could gather her courage to turn around, a familiar deep voice spoke from behind her. You came. She turned. Ethan Callahan sat on his tall black horse, exactly as he had the day before. Clara nodded nervously. Yes. For a moment, Ethan simply studied her, as if confirming she was truly standing there. Then he dismounted. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, Clara admitted quietly. Ethan gestured toward the large ranch house in the distance. Come inside. They walked together along the path toward the house. Ranch workers tipped their hats respectfully to Ethan, but many of them looked curiously at Clara. It wasn't often that strangers arrived at Silver Creek Ranch. As they reached the porch, the front door suddenly burst open. Two boys ran out. Pa! Samuel, the younger one, nearly crashed into Ethan's legs. Daniel followed more calmly. though his eyes lit up with excitement when he saw Clara. "Miss Whitmore!" Clara knelt down instantly. "Hello, Daniel." "Hello, Samuel." Samuel stared at her in surprise. "You're here." Daniel looked between Clara and his father. "Are you visiting the ranch?" For a moment, Clara didn't know how to answer, but Ethan did. He placed a gentle hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Boys, Miss Whitmore is going to be staying with us." Samuel's eyes widened. "Really?" Daniel looked thoughtful. "For how long?" Ethan glanced at Clara. She understood the silent question. Clara swallowed and answered softly. "For as long as you'll have me." Samuel cheered loudly. Daniel smiled, but Ethan remained quiet. He wasn't celebrating, he was watching. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened at Silver Creek Ranch. The house changed. Before Clara arrived, the large ranch home had been quiet and heavy with silence. Meals were simple and quick. The boys often ate alone while Ethan finished work outside, but Clara brought something different. Warmth. She cooked proper dinners, where everyone sat at the table together. She read stories to Samuel before bed. She helped Daniel with his lessons and brought books from the town whenever possible. Even the workers began to notice the difference. The ranch house, once silent and lonely, now held laughter, and slowly even Ethan began to change. At first, he remained distant. He kept long hours on the ranch and spoke little during meals, but he watched everything. He noticed how patiently Clara listened to Samuel's endless questions. He noticed how Daniel's confidence grew when Clara praised his reading. And he noticed something else. The boys were smiling again. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Ethan found Clara sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky burned orange over the endless fields. "You're good with them," he said. Clara smiled gently. "They're wonderful boys. They've been happier since you arrived." "That makes me happy too." There was a quiet pause. Then Clara said something unexpected. "They miss their mother." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." Clara looked at him kindly. "You must miss her too." For a long moment Ethan said nothing, then he spoke quietly. "Every day." The wind moved softly across the fields. Clara didn't push further, but Ethan surprised her again. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of what?" "That bringing someone here would feel wrong." Clara understood, but it doesn't? Ethan looked toward the house where his sons slept peacefully. "No." Then he looked at her. "You didn't replace their mother." He paused. "You gave them something they lost." Clara's eyes softened. "What's that?" "Hope." Weeks turned into months. Winter came to the ranch, covering the land in white snow, but inside the ranch house warmth filled every room. Samuel proudly began reading simple books. Daniel started helping Clara teach the ranch workers younger children, and Ethan began smiling again. One night at dinner, Samuel suddenly asked the question no one expected. "Miss Clara?" "Yes, Samuel." "Are you really our mother now?" The table fell silent. Clara glanced nervously at Ethan, but Ethan answered first. "If she wants to be." Samuel turned hopeful eyes toward Clara. Clara felt her heart melt. She looked at the two boys who had changed her life. Then she looked at Ethan. For the first time since their strange proposal months ago, something deeper passed between them. Trust. Clara reached across the table and gently took Samuel's hand. "Yes," she said softly. "I would be very proud to be your mother." Samuel jumped out of his chair and hugged her tightly. Daniel followed with a shy but grateful smile. And Ethan simply watched, his eyes filled with quiet emotion. The arrangement that began as a simple agreement for shelter had turned into something far greater. A family. And though neither Clara nor Ethan had expected it, something else had quietly begun growing between them. Love. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If you enjoy emotional cowboy stories, Western romance, and life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you never miss the next inspiring story.